I've got a quick point to make about some old teammates at it again. So maybe not the most obvious talking point of the weekend. However, I wanted to give a mention to how brilliant it was to see Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel race each other so hard, side by side, but in a completely clean manner, which is something we've not necessarily seen a lot of this year. We've had
they weren't good at that with teammates, were they?
No, they weren't. And it was quite nice to see it. All this was happening on lap 10 when Max was making his charge through the field. So Max was actually watching this. He had a great view, probably better than any of us, because of the horrendous TV direction this weekend. We only caught a glimpse of it. But looking back on onboards on F1 YouTube or F1's Twitter feed, you can see the whole thing. And they are side by side for over half a lap, but giving each other just about enough room to make it fair racing. And it was just brilliant to see. And like you said, those two drivers have not always had the cleanest history in their past, but actually to see them two fighting on track was a pleasure to see. And really enjoyed it.
Leclerc was another one who hung it out far too long, wasn't it? I mean,
he did. Yeah,
I have no idea how he didn't put it in the wall. And Vettel, I don't know. He seemed to kind of struggle all weekend. Really, he wasn't very happy about going out in Q2.
No, it was a classic Aston Martin weekend, wasn't it? It was a bit underwhelming.
Yeah, very kind of a bit anonymous. And Stroll was doing all right, but made a bit of a hash of it and ended up with a penalty because he spun Gasly around, didn't he? He had that incident where it was like they asked him, "Can you continue in these conditions?" And he said yes, and then immediately spun.
Proceeded to spin.
So that was amusing. But Leclerc had a mega start, and it was good fun to see him racing with Vettel, like you say. They've gotten a bit better at that, I think. It's just so many instances of them driving into each other, and they had a few moments as Ferrari teammates, didn't they?
Yeah. But you've already mentioned Stroll, so I might just add on to this. That for a guy who's had a really up and down F1 career since he started, obviously he came in as a pay driver. We all knew who he was because of his dad. Didn't really have a lot of respect throughout the fans, but actually he's done a very good job over the last couple of years. He's put it on pole once. I think he's been on the podium a couple of times. Started to really gain the respect of probably his fellow drivers and the fans alike. And we can now see why he's in Formula One, because he's actually quite a good driver, especially in changing conditions. That seems to be where he excels quite a lot. But this year, I just feel like he's undoing all the good work he's put in over the last couple of years to gain people's respect. Because once again, we've seen Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel collide on the track. And it definitely looks like it was 100% Lance Stroll's fault, because Vettel was clearly on the outside of him. And there was a wall between Vettel and his car. And Stroll just drives into Vettel, pushing him into the wall. And, luckily it was a light tap. But at one point, the questions were raised whether his steering or his suspension column was broken, or whether his steering column was broken. So it could have been a bad impact. They actually touched again coming out of that corner. And like you mentioned, he also spun around Gasly. So, and that's just in the Russian Grand Prix. I don't have my notes for the previous races, but actually we've seen how many times him and Seb have come together, and how many times Lance has hit other drivers as well. He's really got to calm it, because he's building a bit of a reputation for himself. What do you make of his, of Stroll? I know we've kind of deviated from Vettel and Charles Leclerc, but whilst we're talking about it, have you got any thoughts on Stroll and his performance?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. He pace wise, he seems pretty middle of the road. He never seems to be sort of lightning quick at any particular time. I do think of the time when he put it on pole in those changing conditions, those sort of really weird conditions with Turkey last year, where it's like a mixture of the conditions and also the nature of the resurfaced track. And he just seemed to excel there. But yeah, he's always been a little bit clumsy. Portimao last year as well, where he just decided to try and, I think he tried to like throw it up the inside into turn one where Norris was. I'm trying to remember what exactly what happened there, but he does have his moments where he does tend to sort of make a few mistakes like that. I find him quite middle of the road really in general as a driver. He deserves credit every now and again for where he puts in a solid performance, but he doesn't strike me as like future world champion material or anything like that.
No.
He's arguably one of the elements that's probably holding Aston Martin back as a team in some ways. Maybe, I don't know what he's like as a driver in terms of the development of the car. Maybe he's really good at that. I don't know. He's certainly not bad, but you've got the experience of Sebastian Vettel, and they're trying to build a team that they want to fight for world championships. And it's really hard to imagine Lance Stroll being up for that. I can't sort of see him as a regular race winner or anything. So yeah, he was clumsy. He was very clumsy this weekend, and like you say, it was a classic Stroll weekend because he had a great start and had a successful undercut with the pit stop and had reasonable pace. It wasn't like electric, but it was good enough to make progress. And then, yeah, like you say, he just put it all in the bin.
Yeah, it's strange because if this is any other driver we'd be talking about, we'd be like, well, if an F2 driver makes an appearance and it looks promising, he'd probably lose his seat and someone else would come in. A bit like, we're talking about Yuki and Antonio being a little bit underwhelming and causing problems for the team, or not, because actually Antonio I don't think actually causes problems. I just don't think he does anything. But Yuki's obviously been quite controversial this year with regards to his thoughts and opinions and his driving style. But Stroll's quite lucky that, and I don't mean to sound horrible, but he's quite lucky that his family are so heavily invested in Aston Martin. Because that really takes the pressure off his performance, because I can't see him losing his seat. I can't see him moving teams to another team, because why would you give up a secure seat, potentially go elsewhere, unless it was a top tier team? But that's not going to happen. But he's constantly making these mistakes. So it's a really weird situation. You've got Vettel, who's beaten him in the championship by 11 points. Vettel, who's a 4-time world champion, obviously brings the experience, brings the, you'd like to think develops the car quite well. And I'm just struggling to understand what Stroll brings apart from the family name. And that sounds terrible, but his performance has been so underwhelming this year, and he's causing issues.
Vettel is, of course, also like a big commercial draw, because
absolutely
he's Sebastian Vettel. So obviously he's a figure of some importance, and so he's good for that sort of thing, PR and all the rest of it. Yeah, I don't know. The situation is weird with Stroll. You're right. I'm not quite sure how that will progress. They want to be a championship winning team. I can't see how it's going to be with Lance Stroll at the wheel, but not at the moment anyway. Maybe I'd be proven wrong in the future, but not at the moment. It feels that way.